All right, everybody. Thank you once again for joining this session today. So in the last session, if I have a quick recap, we have learned about Azure Virtual Machines backup, how to configure backup, and importance of the backup, and how to trigger the backup. And in case if the backup job is failed, how to troubleshoot. In Microsoft documentation, how do you find the step-by-step process to resolve the issues? And what are the logs you have to refer to fix the Azure backup issues, Azure VM backup issues, I would say. And how do you perform the restore, and what are the different restore methods you have it, and how do you monitor your backup jobs? So we have covered the virtual machine backup, and in today's session, I'm going to cover uh, database backups, which means if you have a SQL server running on Azure VM and you have multiple databases, you want to configure the backup, what is the procedure you have to follow? And how do you monitor the backup jobs, and how do you get notified if there is a backup job failures, right? And what are the restore options you have in case if you need to recover the database, and couple of best practices, as in when we start discussing. So on the flow, we will discuss many best practices as well. Okay, so just to talk about the environment, I already set up the environment, and I will also show you the setup with the new configuration as well. So just to save the time, I did set up the environment as well. So assuming that this is your real infrastructure, what you have in your environment, but here I have only 3 virtual machines, which I'm saying SQL database. INC is nothing but Central India, and there are there's one virtual machine which is in East US, another one which is in West Europe location. There are 3 databases, and they are database servers. They are part of 3 different locations. Okay, now to configure backup for this, I have created recovery service vault as well. So 3 recovery service vault we have in 3 different regions. When it comes to the backup, your virtual machines and your recovery service vault should be in the same location. Otherwise, you cannot configure the backup for those virtual machines. So now, so if I go back to these virtual machines, I will log into these servers, and I will show you what are the databases we have it and how many databases I have created additionally. Okay, so first I'm going to the East2S1, which is the SQL VM01. The IP address is starting with 172. So I have taken RDP to the server. So this is the server. I'll just open the command prompt. So host name. This is the SQLDB VM01, which is in a East-West location. Okay, and we have another one which is in a West Europe location. So I'll go to command prompt, hostname. This is VM2. All right. So now we have 2 virtual machines which I connected. I'm going to show you what are the database I've configured it. So I opened the SQL Server Management Studio. While creating the virtual machine, I've chosen the SQL application or image that contains the SQL application already configured. So that's why I'm able to see all the required tools inside the virtual machine. So I launched the SQL Server Management Studio. And by default, you see system database. One is master, model, MSDB, and TempDB. So by default, when you configure backup, TempDB is excluded. Okay. So other than this, I've created other databases. What you see here, student 1, 2, 4, and 5, 6, 7, 8. And you see one database is missing here in the sequence, which is student 3. So I created the database, I configured backup, later I deleted. Okay. Because what happens is when you configure backup, there is an entry updated in the Azure backup solution, the database entry. When you delete it in the server level, it may not be updated in the Azure recovery service vault, which I will show you. Okay. And going to the another server, which is in West Europe location. And this one has many databases. You see approximately around 11 databases, custom databases, and there are 4 system databases. Okay, so and I have another server too. Okay, and if I go back to the, I think I've powered it off. Let me just check it. It's running only. Okay, let me take RDP to this server. This is in Central India location. All right, so we are inside the server, and let's wait for a few seconds. So this one, for this server, whatever the databases we have, I haven't configured backup yet because I want to show you how to perform the discovery and what happens when I perform the discovery. So those things I want to show you, so that's why I did not configure backup for this server. So I'm going to show you how to launch the SQL Server Management Studio. So when you open and go to the start menu, you will see tools, SQL Server tools. There you see SQL Server Management Studio. Try to launch it, and when you launch it, it will ask you for the authentication. For this server, I'm going to use Windows authentication. Whatever the credentials I used to log into the server, the same credentials I'm going to use to connect to this databases. So this is the tool we use to manage the databases on this SQL server. So this takes some time. We'll come back to this. So if I go back to the H2S server, and if I go to security, and if I go to the logins, you see one extension or a service account that gets created when you perform the discovery operation. As part of the backup configuration for your databases, so there will be a discovery operation that happens. So discovery of server, which means Azure Backup Service will try to discover the machines which are in the same location as your recovery service vault. That's a step one. Step two is discovering the databases. So when the server is discovered, when you select the server, you will have an option to discover the databases. When you discover the databases, there will be one service account that gets created inside the machine, that is NT Service Azure WL Backup Plugin SVC. WL is nothing but workload backup, right? The workload. So this will get created, and this will by default have the sysadmin permission allocated. Okay, if this is not added, so you might see discovery of the databases operation will fail, and it will clearly tells you why it is not discovering the databases, and you will clearly see the error message, and you can come here and go to the server roles and assign sysadmin permissions. So right now for this database server, automatically this permission is set, because when you create a SQL server from the marketplace, okay, so you will have the MS SQL server that is responsible for allocating these permissions. Oh, sorry, this one is SQL extension query, I believe this is the one. So this is responsible for allocating these permissions to the service account. It's okay. So this what happens. So if you look at the other server which we have in Central India, that for that server we did not configure the backup, or we did not even perform the discovery. So which means you expect this service account is not available on that server, right? So I go to the server. This is the Central India server, trying to connect to this SQL Server Management Studio. And if I go here, so there are no databases created. So only the system databases is what you see: master, model, and MSDB temp database. If I go to security, if I go to the logins, you don't see that service account exists here. It's not exist, right? So if I do a discovery of the server and discovery of databases, that account will automatically gets created here. So what we will do, we'll go to Azure portal and we'll try to discover the databases. So we will see whether account is getting created or not, whether database are discovering or not. So discovery of databases takes approximately 5 to 10 minutes or more than that, depends on number of databases you have it. So since it is in Central India, so you might know we have to go to Central India Recovery Service Vault and try to discover the databases. I'm going to the recovery service vault, and this one in Central India here, RSV INC, India Central. And I go to the backup option here. So you can see here workloads running on Azure, and workload type, I'm going to choose SQL Server in Azure VM. Okay, you see no DB discovered. Click Start Discovery to discover the databases and validate the backup permissions. I'm going to click on Start Discovery. So this for the first time, what it will do, it is discovering the items, which are nothing but discovering the SQL server, or maybe I would say discovering the virtual machines which are in the same location as your recovery service vault. So I'm expecting the SQL server, which is in Central India location, should be discovered. Yes. So as expected, we were able to discover the SQL server, and the next step is to discover the databases. You can see an option here, discover databases in the bottom. I'm going to say discover DBs. So as I said, this process takes some time. Let's say, 5 to 10 minutes. Sometimes it will be less or more than that as well. So let's wait for a few minutes to see the discovery operation is completed. Okay. Oh, looks like I was speaking in mute. Yeah, I was talking about the extensions that gets installed during the discovery operation. So by default, when you create a VM from the Azure Marketplace, you will see SQL IAS extension that gets installed. And this is the one which is responsible for adding the right permissions to your the workload backup extension service account that's creates in the SQL server. If this is not exist, you might see discovery of databases failed error. Okay, so since it is already there, and it looks like the discovery operation also completed successfully. So we will log into the server, and I will show you where this extension gets loaded or created, and where do you find the logs related to this extension? And this extension plays a major role when it comes to the database discovery and database backups. Now, let us say right now only three system databases what we are discovered, right? In case if in future you add more and more databases, so what happens is, this extension is automatically is going to discover those databases and enable backup for them. So that's the importance of this workload backup extension. So I'll go to the server. So now let me do a refresh here. So this one, it's still not showing up. Probably, it's still discovering the databases. I will go back to the East US location server. And here you can see under the C volume and Windows Azure folder log section. If you go to the plugins, you'll see the workload backup extension, and this will have the information about the what this extension is doing. It's triggering the database backups and discovering the databases and everything that you can see from here. In case if the discovery is failing, backup is not happening, and all these things, you can just come to this document, this logs location, and open the latest file and start reviewing it. You might see some error information here, and you can start looking into it as well. But moreover, you don't need to depend on these logs, because Azure Recovery Service Vault will give you the error message with the detailed description. And if you search that error message in the Microsoft documentation, you will find the steps to resolve it. In case if you're not able to find anything over there, you can always rely on this one. Okay, this is the logs location. And if you see this is a packages section as well. Within the package section, you can see this one. Okay, it's all about the binaries about related to this workload backup extension that will be stored under the plugin section. Okay, this is about the logs location, how this gets created, and the how this works. All right, so I will just go back to this one, do a refresh here again. So I probably will try to close this one and reconnect it. Okay, and let's see. All right, you can see here now the service account is created. And if I go to the properties and go to the server roles, you can see sysadmin permissions also available. Now, so which means the discovery of databases is completed at Azure side. Let's go to the recovery service vault. And you can see the discovery operation is completed for the India Central Recovery Service Vault. Now what you can do is you can directly jump into the configuring backup. So when you click on configure backup, you have to select the backup policy. Like you selected the backup policy for the virtual machine backup. Similarly, how to select the backup policy for the SQL Server databases. So you have a full backup, differential backup, and log backup for the database backups. So usually the recommendations, right? So full backup happens, once in a week, which is mostly on Sunday, because, full backup takes a lot of time. So that's why they plan it over the weekend. And you can specify the time and time range, time zone when you want to trigger the backup, which time zone, and how long you want to retain this full backup. Same for the monthly retention, yearly retention. So I'm going to uncheck this for now. It's not required. And differential backup also can be enabled here. When you enable it, so you have to say except Sunday. So you have to select other days, because on Sunday you have the full backup that is being triggered. So we should not have any conflict with the full backup. That's why we unselect Sunday, and remaining all other days you have a full differential backup that gets triggered once. So once in a day, and except Sunday, and the retention is 30 days for this one. Okay. So that's a one we follow. And you have the log backup, and log backup frequency you can specify from 15 minutes to 24 hours. It all depends on your databases. how your application, how frequently the application is writing the data into the database, and how much data is being generated, the retention drive, how frequently it is being full. So based on those conditions, your SQL administrator will recommend a backup frequency for the log backup. So for now, let us go with the 15 minutes and 15 days retention for this one. So then if you want to enable the compression, you can just select enable, but this will save your storage cost, but at the same time, it will also impact your SQL Server performance. So when you click on OK, the next step is where you are going to add your backup databases. Click on add. So this is where you will see your list of SQL servers that are discovered as part of the discovery process. At the same time, you will see list of databases that are discovered as part of the discovery operation. So this server, India Central Server, have only 3 databases. That's why you're able to see 3 databases here. In case if you add any future databases, you have to come again, do the discovery and reconfigure the backup. So as I said earlier, so right now we have 3 databases. You configure backup for them. So one fine day, your application creates a new database, and maybe it keeps on creating databases, and they forget to update Azure administrators to configure backup for those databases. And one fine day again, you see a recovery request, and when you check that here, you don't see the backup database for that backup. So those kind of problems will be there, in case if somebody update you to configure backup for the newly created databases. To avoid those problems, we have auto protect feature. When you select on, so automatically whenever there is a new database that is added to your SQL server, that will automatically have the backup configured with the same backup policy that is attached to this SQL server. Okay, so that's a feature. You can always look for it. You have to enable this feature. With this feature, you will not miss any database backups. All right, this feature has to be enabled. So we click OK. Then the next step is to enable backup. So when you enable backup, so based on the backup policy, it will trigger the full backup. Once the full backup is completed, the differential and log backup, as per the schedule, it will keep on triggering. Okay, and this backup job process takes approximately 10 to 15 minutes, right? And depends on the data you have, the backup time might take. So if I go to the recovery service vault again and go to the backup jobs here, so you see configuring backup. The first job is registering a server with the backup vault, and that has happened. And we discovered the discovery job is not showing up here. It is ideally supposed to show up. And once the discovery is completed, you will see the backup jobs we just enabled. It takes some time to show up here as well. Okay, so since it is going to take some time, you see configuring backup is in progress. Take some time to complete the configuring backup and triggering the backup. So what I've done is I have triggered the backup for West Europe location VM and East US location VMs. So we'll go to East US recovery service vault and West Europe location recovery service vault. We will see the database backups, how many databases we have configured backup there, and what are the different stages of operations we went through, and each and every operation status from the backup jobs. Okay, so I'm going to the recovery service vault, and these are the 3 recovery service vault what we have. Since it is being test environment, I'm showing you some demos, so you only see 3 at the moment, but in the real time you might see 50 plus recovery service vault, 100 plus recovery service vault. Each recovery service vault might have multiple virtual machine backup, multiple database backups. So when as an Azure administrator, you cannot go to each and every recovery service vault and check the backup status and pull them manually. We need to have a centralized monitoring solutions. So once we review the backup jobs and the backup items, I will show you how you can configure the centralized monitoring solution. So I'm going to West Europe recovery service vault first. I'll go to the backup items. You can see there are 15 databases that are added to this recovery service vault. So that includes the system databases and the custom databases which I created inside the server. Okay, and so here one database from system database excluded. There's a TempDB that's by default excluded. So I click on this one. You see there are many databases, couple of them showing unhealthy. So I did intentionally made these databases unhealthy because I want to show you the failures as well. So we'll talk about them, why it is unhealthy and all. So right now you see there are 15 databases, and if you want to check the databases health or further details, click on view details, and you can see there's one full backup happened, one differential backup happened, and these things have triggered manually. Okay, and you have a restore option, stop backup option, and these are all of the things that I think you can self-explain by yourself, and we'll try to spend some time in the next session. But these are the properties and these are the options what you have. Okay, so if I go for the other one, even this one also have similar data, full backup is triggered, and for the another database you'll have the full backup or differential backup will be available. Okay, and they are like based on the backup policy it is being triggered. And if I go to this one which is in unhealthy status, click on view details, full backup was triggered, but it is saying last backup status is unhealthy, which means last backup whichever is triggered is failed, right? It's not successful, that's why it says unhealthy. We'll try to learn why it is unhealthy. Okay, so if I go to the backup jobs, let me go to the backup jobs. You can see here it is in the monitoring section, and there are a few failures. Differential backups are failed for few databases, and here one more database which is failed. This is the one which we're saying last backup is failed. So let me search with this database here in the find search window. So you can see configuring backup. So this is where initially the database is added to the backup. The next operation was like full backup that was triggered. That is again completed, which is successful. And immediately there's a log backup that is triggered and differential backup that is triggered. So if you look at this, 9:55 is where the full backup is triggered. 9:59 is where log backup triggered. And 10 o'clock is where differential backup trigger. Multiple backup jobs are triggered. So the moment it is started, maybe it is complete or not, the same time the other one is triggered. So we'll see what is error. So just click on the view details. You see user error pivot doesn't exist. That's one error. If I go to the other failure, it is giving the same thing. SQL database not exist. So if I search this error code in the Microsoft documentation, let us see. Okay, just search with this one and do a control F. SQL database doesn't exist. The database was either deleted or renamed. Check if the database was accidentally deleted or renamed. If the database was accidentally deleted, to continue backups, restore the database from the database to the version location and perform this option, which means this database showing up in Azure portal, okay, but it may be deleted or renamed in the server level. So since this is the West Europe one, right? So I'll go to this one. And do you see this database, what you saw in Azure portal? No, right? That's a EUWDB12 and that does not exist. So what I've done is I have created database here and triggered the backup and configured the backup and triggered the full backup and trigger the log backup as well and differential backup. So before I trigger it, I have removed the database from the SQL server, which means this is the common scenario what you see in the real time as well. Okay, so your application team creates a database and they do the testing. Since we enable auto protect, any new database that is created automatically added to the backup. Okay, and automatically add to the backup and the backup will be working fine. And if application team deleted the database or database team deleted the database at a OS level, and if they forget to update the Azure side, so this error will occur. So they deleted from the OS level, but they did not delete in the Azure side. So that is the reason you see this problem, right? And if this is keep on repeating, you might see more and more failures and more errors. and your team have to spend time in troubleshooting these problems, acknowledging these errors, and they realize that, okay, they go back to application team or database team. Hey, can you check if this database exists or not? They say it does not exist. So this entire process takes a lot of time, right? So what I'm trying to say here is the tool is introduced to automatically configure backup, auto protect on. At the same time, that also have disadvantages. If somebody deleted the database at OS level, it is not deleting in the Azure side. Okay, so these are the couple of failures, right? If you go further and check, other database failures, um, it says user error parent full backup is missing. So we'll try to see what it is. Okay, and do a control F here, and you see full backup, first full backup is missing for this data source, full backup is missing for this database. Log and differential backups are parents to the full backup, which means before the full backup is happening, the differential backup is triggered. The differential or log backup is being triggered. That's the reason you're seeing this problem. For this, the solutions are very simple. You have to go to the database and trigger the full backup. That's all. Or automatically the next backup will automatically be triggered as a full backup. You see, it is failed with the error message that we just saw, right? Full backup is missing, and next backup automatically triggered, and that is converted as a full backup. So this is how the backup jobs works. Okay, and you see we almost spend 5 minutes time to review this backup job failures, right? Since I know this, how this works, all those things, we are able to figure it out the problems. Just think, you have many databases and many databases are failing with the different errors, and there's only one recovery service vault. You have to go to another recovery service vault and check there are many other failures, right? So how do you work, how do you monitor, maybe how do you start fixing these problems, right? When you see these many errors, how do you handle them, right? It's kind of difficult. Even if you want to enable alerts, you see backup alerts here. You can also create alerts from here. You get an email, you see there's a backup failure alert, it's already fired, right? So there are a few things. It's already giving some alert errors and all, right? So but this may not be helpful, right? Because you get too many errors, too many alerts, you get it, and it's difficult to fix it. So what we are doing is, instead of having multiple emails, multiple looking at the multiple databases, going through recovery vault and check it out, right? So we will try to stream these logs to log analytics workspace. So all recovery vault backup jobs, I'm going to stream them to the one centralized log analytics workspace, and we use Kusto queries to fetch those failures and start working on it. So to do that, what I have done is I went to the diagnostic settings of recovery service vault, and if I click on add diagnostic settings, you have an option to select the backup jobs and stream them to the one of the log analytics workspace. So the log analytics workspace can be in any region, any subscription, that doesn't matter. You can still stream these logs to the log analytics workspace. Log analytics workspace will store this backup jobs information. Later you are going to query the backup jobs and put them in a right format so that your team can understand and use that to fix certain problems. Okay, so I have already enabled this logs, because as soon as you enable, it won't show up there. It will take some time to create a table for your recovery service vault, and it will take some time to project the data over there. So to save the time, what I've done is I already enabled for all of these 3 recovery service vault so that I can show you the data. Okay, so now I will go to the log analytics workspace. So this is the, let me search the log analytics workspace here. This is the one. And if I go to the logs here, log section, and this is the time range, you can specify how many days backup you want to search it. So, and if I expand the log management, you can see Azure backup alerts and add on Azure backup jobs, policy information, and how much is the backend storage that is being utilized, and what is the usage of your log analytics workspace. Many tables you have. Let's say these all are the tables, and if you try to run this table, you will get the information about these tables. So I try to run this. I'm choosing last 24 hours. Okay, I'll just move this to the left side and I'm trying to run this query. So it's taking time. It's giving an error for us. Now you got the data. It's like, you have got like multiple jobs information, and you can see here the time is in the UTC. If you want to change it to your local time, change it to the local time here. And you can see around 94 rows what you have here in the right top bottom right. You can see here 94 rows. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I don't want to see the data like this. I want to see the data in a structured way. Okay, so let us see if we can create a query to fetch the data that we needed. Okay, so what we will do is we will project time generated, like when the backup job is triggered, and what is the operation name, and category. I don't want to have any category. So backup management type talks about, what kind of backup is it? Is it a database backup or, VM backup? Whenever you see Azure workload as a management backup type, it's a database backup. If you see Azure IaaS VM, that means it's a VM backup. Okay. And you can also see job duration in seconds and job failure code. So let's say job duration in seconds and job failure code, right? So failure code success or failure. If it is failed, what is the error? And job operation is important. You have job operation like configuring backup and triggering backup, registering. Sometimes if you try to perform a recovery, and you will see a recovery as a operation name. I'm going to say job operation as well. And job operation subtype also, let us take job operation subtype, which talks about is it a full backup, differential backup, or log backup. All right. And the most important one is the job status. The job is completed or failed with errors. Job status. Okay. And if you want to further check any other things, you can check it out. You can get the database name from here. You see under the protected container unique ID, you can get the location, and you can also get the server name and the database name. Okay, and if you want to get the vault information, you can get from the, I think this only just your location it is giving. But if I go to the resource ID, I think I should be able to find some more information. So let us see what is there in the resource ID. It has a vault name. You can see the vault name from here. And so there are many other properties which you can use to fetch the right information. You can see backup item unique ID. So this one also you can use it to get the database name and virtual machine name. So we can use some queries like split query and all to fetch this information. So what I will do is I'll just project this one as well. Backup items friendly name is there. Let's see if that gives information. And unique ID also I'm taking. Let us run this one. Okay, it's giving all the details, job operation, everything. So it's giving all the operations. I want to get only the operation related to the backup. So I'm going to put a where condition here, where job operation equal to backup. Okay, then I will run this one. So now I only get the data that is related to the backup. Okay, and out of all of this, I want to get only the failed jobs, not the successful jobs. So now I'm going to say where, so where do you see the failed or success or completed? You see under the job status, right? So I'm going to say job status is equal to failed or not equal to completed. So anything is fine. So I'm going to say failed. If I run this one, I will only get the failure data. This is what you need on a day-to-day basis. When you log into the shift, you are going to run this query and fetch the backup jobs. It is not specific to one location, one VM, or one recovery service vault. You have hundreds of recovery service vault in different locations and hundreds of servers and databases. That doesn't matter. It gives you everything, because all the recovery service vault backup jobs information we are storing into one centralized location, right? Centralized log analytics workspace. With this, you are able to fetch data at one place. Okay, these are the fail jobs, and with this you can see, you can just go and search these Java failure codes in Microsoft documentation. You will get the step-by-step process to resolve these problems. Okay, now here, if you want to further check what is the backup item name, so we can write some more queries to fetch this one. I'll try to write now. And I think the backup items friendly name is not required, it's giving empty value, so let's not select that, and let me run this query. Okay, so that's good. So now let's try to extract this information and provide a server name as well as the database name. Yeah, so we can use the split command to split this data. So split of backup manage backup items unique ID and comma. So segregating this one, which one we need? Last one, right? So let's say -1. It will pick up the last entry from here. So if I expand this, you will see more. You can see here from this one, I'm going to check this one. From this, I'm going to pick up the last one. This is the database name. So I'm going to say this is a DB name. Okay. To get the DB name from the last, I'm going to select this one. So for that, I'm saying -1. If I say -2, I get this property. It's after the semicolon, right? I have to use semicolon. And if I get the exact server name, this is the third property from the last. So I'm going to say -3. So I'm going to use the same query here, split command. And the same table, same column, I'm going to say -3. So I'm going to pick up the third one from the last. Okay, that's the server name. We got the database name, we got the server name. Now, if you want to get the resource group name, you can do the same thing. So what you can do is, let's say extend, and you can say -4, or you can say from the beginning, this is 0, this is 1, this is 2 and 3. So you can see, you can say 3, or you can say -4 also. Okay, and if you want to get the location, let's say this is the, okay, I have to change these values actually. This is the server name, and this is going to be resource group. I'm saying RG, this is going to be a location. For the location, I'm going to say just 0. Okay, so it will pick up the first one. All right, I think this should be fine. So now I have to project these values as well. So what I need to do, time generated, and I'm gonna say server name first, then DB name, then I think job operation and job failure code, operation name, job failure code I have to select. And where is the job status? Job status I should select here. Okay, I'm just putting them in a right order here. So I'll remove this one. It's not required. All right, now if I run this and see what's going to happen. So we are getting the data. Server name is empty, DB name is empty, and what else is empty? Looks like whatever I've selected here, it's not giving the right data. Okay, it's giving the empty values. So there seems like, there's some issue with this one. I'll put RG and see, RG and location, whether I'm getting the data or not. Okay, so looks like there's some issue with our query. So let's put this way. No, Still it is not giving. Split command is not working. Backup item unique ID is what we have to select. I have selected the wrong one. That's the reason it's not giving. So let's put semicolon once again, and I'll update this one everywhere here. We have selected the wrong column. That's the reason it's giving the empty values. Now let me run this one. It's good actually. You see here, right? It's giving the right information now. So server name and database name, what is the operation name, and what is the status, and what is the error code, and how much time it took, right? So what's the operation name? So you can see everything here. Almost all the information that is required for us to analyze it. Okay. Now you can just run this query on a daily basis, or you can just create a workbook. The workbook, you can have more filters, and your team just go to the workbook and just export the data and start working on it. Otherwise, you can also send this or the email so that your team can start getting into the email. So they don't need to come to the workspace and run the queries. They just get an email, and in the email, they can check everything. In case if you have a ticketing tool, you send an email to your ticketing tool, and that there will be a ticket that gets created, and whoever is in the shift, they just check the ticket and start working on it. And now you guys know how to start resolving these problems as well, right? So now you know end-to-end process. One thing that is missing is how do you configure the email alerts? You can configure the email alerts from here itself. You have a new alert rule. Okay. So it is like, you can combine. So what we are doing is we are not creating a one alert or one ticket for each failure. So we are combining the all the failures in last 24 hours or maybe last 5 hours into one output, and we are going to send an email. Otherwise, the default alerts, what happens is whenever there is a failure occur for each database, you get an email or you get a ticket. If you see there are like 100 database backup failures, and you get 100 tickets or 100 emails, and you have to spend time in acknowledging those tickets or acknowledging those emails. So instead of that, we will run this query for every 4 hours or 8 hours or 24 hours, maybe 1 hour, and we'll club everything into one table and send out an email or try to check this in a dashboard. Okay, so you can create a new alert rule here, and conditions and everything is here. Okay, so, and you can say specific threshold, let's say in a specific time zone. If it's the value or output is greater than 1, you send an email. You can create an action groups and send an email. All those things you can do. But the problem with this action group is you cannot customize the email subject, right? You don't have more control. You cannot customize the, okay, let's create one here. Let's create an action group. So emails and notification, let's say email again, send email. That's not this one, this one. Send email, and this one I'm going to select the email ID. Let's say support@vhitsolutions.com. Okay, I click OK, and next. All right, so create this one. So I'm creating an action group. So if there is a criteria that meets, so what it does, it's gonna send an email to the people who are email ID, whatever I mentioned here. I'm going to create this alert first. There's a failure. Backup failure is the alert name. I think that should be fine. And you see 1.50 per alert. The more alert you get, I think the more you have to pay. Now, if I go to my support email ID, so I should be able to see one here. At least I'll get a sample alert here. So that you don't like it. I mean, your team doesn't like it, because it doesn't have the more customizations. So it's just like, automated email that you get from Microsoft, or kind of, look, it should looks like, right? So that's why, we don't prefer that. So what we will do, we'll use logic apps, to send an email to your team members or your ticketing system. So for that, we will use logic app solution. So what I will do, I have already done the logic app setup, but I will show you from the beginning once again. So go to the logic apps. You can click on create logic app. I already did one. Click on create and select the resource group. I'm just selecting the existing one. You can select any resource group or create a new one for a specific to this logic apps. Provide the name, let's say logic app -dev or test something you can give, and workflow based logic app, and location you can specify. I'm going with the consumption based because it's good for the testing purpose. That's what they're saying, and you just create it. So once you create it, you will have an option to design a workflow. So the workflow will be like, what it will do is it will connect to your Loganalytics workspace, step 1, and the step 2 is to fetch the backup failures, and step 3 is to convert them into a table, and step 4 is to send an email to the respective team members. Okay, and before that, if you want to try this in a recurrence or a trigger, you have to add a schedule for it. So this is the logic app that I want to explain you guys. So here, if you go to the designer mode, it's easy for you to design this workflow. You are not a coding background person. The designer will help you a lot here. So I just explained you the workflow, how we have to follow. Go to the recurrence. You can specify how frequently you want to trigger this. Let's say every 4 hours. Select here, and the frequency, let's change it to the hours. Every 4 hours it's going to trigger. The next step, what I mentioned, is to connect to the log analytics workspace. So search here log analytics workspace. So Azure monitor logs, run query and list results, and this way you're going to select the authentication methods. I'm going to sign in with my organization account. It's signing in. This way you're going to select your subscription where your recovery service Loganalytics workspaces exist. So I have many subscriptions here. I'm choosing the right one where my Loganalytics workspaces exist. And the Loganalytics workspace is created under the DBRG, and the resource type is Loganalytics workspace, and the resource name, you can see the one which we created is showing up here. This is where you're going to run the query. So whatever the query that we have defined, we will just enable it here. Okay, then go to the next step. So in the next step, what I mentioned, we have to create a table. The table will be there under the data operations. You can also say table here. It will try to fetch it. There are many other options. You can use SQL database tables and many other things you have it. But what we need is we will go with the built-in data operations where you are going to get a HTML table. Okay, so from where you have to create this table? From the above query, whatever the output you're receiving it, you have to create a table out of it. So I'm going to say value. You can see run query and list result. This is the step name, and whatever the output you're receiving from here, you're going to select that here. So once you have this, table is created, you have to send an email, right? So I'm going to use Outlook 365. Maybe you can say type email, whatever the solutions, email solutions are available at Microsoft, you will see all of them. These many email solutions, what you have it, you can select the one which is related to you. So what I've done is I've selected Office 365 Outlook because I already have the licensed version of the Outlook. I've selected this, and here you have many options based on the scenarios. We'll be choosing the right one, but here I want to send an email, so I'm looking for the send email option here. Send an email v2 version. Okay, so this is where I have to authenticate again with my Office 365 account. It's going to authenticate. Okay, so this is where I'm going to specify whom I have to send an email, what should be the subject, what should be the email body, and all those things. So I have done this. Once you are done with this, right, you just need to save and run the trigger. Otherwise, it will trigger the this one automatically for every 4 hours or whatever the time frame you have specified. I've done the setup. I'm going to show you how I've done it. So I'm going to Logic Apps. I'm canceling this one, going to the Logic Apps, going to the test one, which I already set up. I'm going to the Logic App Designer here. And you can see here the recurrence I mentioned every 15 minutes. The query what I've given is like, is a simple one. So when I was setting up this one, I didn't have much data. So that's why I couldn't set up this one. So right now I'm saying complete query, and time range I'm going to specify custom. If you want to specify the custom value, you can specify. Otherwise, you can say last 12 hours, and you can say table and everything is same. I'm not going to modify anything, and I'm going to send an email to my email ID, and I'm going to say, hey team, please find the Azure backup data, or I would say, please find the Azure backup jobs which are failed. Okay, and this is the output that we are going to get it from the above values. Let's say here again I'm choosing it, so value, and here I'm going to say output. So whatever is there in the table, I'm going to get it in the email. You can add more parameters, and I'm just selecting the simple and sample one. Okay, so now I have set up the Logic App. I'm going to run this query or run this trigger. So when I run this trigger, you can check the status here. It is completed. If I check this one, the output you will be able to see from here. So in the output, you can see it's in a JSON format. You can see the error messages and error code and all those things. And table also it's created. You see how the table looks like, right? And if I see an email, it already sent an email. So I can go to this one, go to the sent items, and you can see the backup jobs is sent to my another email ID. If I go to that email and do a refresh here, okay, it's having some issue, it seems. Let's see. Yep, you can see the backup jobs information. So don't you think it is looking good? You can customize more. You can add information to your OneNote, or maybe some troubleshooting guide. Maybe you can also automate these things, like to auto resolve the problems and all. Your team just focus on one distribution group list, or maybe if they are, if you have a say, a ticketing tool introduced, you just monitor the ticketing tool itself, right? They don't need to run the query. They don't need to go to each and every recovery as well to see the backup job status. This is not only for the database backups, guys. It's for all the type of backups, VM backup, and your SAP HANA workload backups, anything, whatever you configured under the recovery service vault. If you start streaming them to Logantic Workspace, you can monitor them from there. Okay. Now, if you look at this, I want to get the backups. I want to get an email with the backups databases list with a specific error code. Okay. Let's say with this, right? With this error code, there are three back databases, or two databases at least, right? So two databases failed with this error code, and with this one there are two databases. I want to get an email based on the error code. Now I'm getting everything into one, right? If I want to customize it, even that is also possible. Just go back to your this one, Azure Logic Apps. Go to the designer mode once again. Here you have to make little bit changes. Go to the HTML table, I don't know, let's say this one. Here in the email subject, you can specify based on the error code. So no, it's not giving here. Basically, you have to create a table, variable, and from the variable, you should be able to do this. So let us say add an action here. action. Action is, let's say, variable. Okay, you are going to save this data into a variable first. Variables, I'm going to initialize a variable first. I'm going to say first output. Okay, first output, and it will be a string, and the value, let's say it's based on the job failure code. Okay, and I'll put it here. I think I should be able to drag it here. So what I have done is the workflow have changed because I want to get the emails based on the error code, not the bulk data, which includes the all error codes, right? So for that, initially I mentioned as a recurrence, every 15 minutes it's going to run. And here it is going to get all the failures information. And later, whatever the failures data we are getting it, I'm going to, I want to save this in a variable so that I can use this data to perform various options. So for that, I initialize a variable, and for that variable, I have assigned the value. When I say set value for the variable, whatever I've created here, you can see the variable name here. The output is from the about table. From this table, whatever the output I'm getting, I'm selecting only the job failure code, which means the job failure code output, right? If there are like 10 error codes, for each error code, you see, for each error code, the value set in this. And what I'm doing is next, again, I'm running the same query, but here I'm specifying the job failure code contains this variable. Whatever the error code in this loop is set into this variable will be updated here, and the data output will be executed, and whatever the output we're getting it, I'm going to store it in a table, and table output will be showing up here, right? So that's the plan. And so it looks like there is some issue with this time range. I'm trying to fix it now. So I updated this manually, and let me save this one. Now I just saved it, and I'm trying to run this query to see if this works or not. So let us wait and see. Okay, good. It's working. So we got 12. We are going to get 12 emails, and we'll see whether we're getting the right data or not. So this is good. You can see here, you're getting a email based on the error code. Okay. So whatever the backups databases failed with this error code, you're getting into one email. It's like customizing it. So there are many emails I'm getting, further this needs to have some improvisation. I'm keep on getting multiple emails. That's totally fine. All right, so total 11 emails we are going to get it, and we can also modify these and set these values properly. Okay, so this is how you send an email in case if there is any backup failures. It's just we are sending it to one email, but you can send this to a distribution group, or you can send this to a ticketing tool, so automatically the ticket will be created. So this can have further improvement, right? So it's not mandatory that you have to use the logic apps. There can be other solution that your organization might be using it. But if somebody asks you, you can say this is the solution, we have been using it, and it's working well. And what is the expectation from you, right? Are you going to set up this in your environment if you are Azure administrator? Maybe not, right? It might be somebody else who is an expert, on the logic apps and the monitoring side. They might have done it. In case if it is not done, your management might ask you to, if they ask you to come up with a solution, you might show them as a POC, but it's not necessary that they will stick to the solution, right? So there can be various use cases and different scenarios. So this is one of the scenario which I'm talking, couple of customers which already implemented this solution as well. Okay. So from this today's session, what you need to learn is, so you need to know how to configure the database backups. What are the steps we have to follow, like be it a discovery of SQL Server, discovery of our databases, and what happens when the database is discovered, what kind of service account that gets created, what kind of permissions it will have it, and what are the logs location, how do you troubleshoot if there is a failure at a database backup, and what log you have to refer. You should just be aware of it. And how to trigger the backup, and when you trigger the backup, how do you validate, how do you go to backup jobs and check it out in case if you see any failure under the backup jobs, where do you find the right information, right? And how do you integrate your recovery service vault backup jobs to the Logantics workspace? And once you integrate it, how do you create a define the query or Custo query to fetch the backup failures, or backup inventory, or backup job status, right? So the beyond, you might have to know how to create alerts from the Logantics workspace, or how do you integrate with this Logantics workspace with the logic apps, to see, have a centralized monitoring solution, right? So these are things that you have to learn from this today's session. And in the next session, I will show you how to perform the recovery. And once we're done with the recovery of databases, we'll talk about the Azure files and folders backup using the Azure Recovery Service Agent. All right. So I know it's very lengthy topic today, but I am hoping this might have given you some overview, or some understanding about Azure SQL database backups, and how we set up the monitoring, and how we troubleshoot the backup failures. Thank you for your time. And in case if you have any questions, feel free to ask me, or put, if you're watching it on our YouTube, just put a comment, right? Thank you so much.